Hello and welcome to Smaulgld. In case you missed the top gold and silver and crypto stories for the week ended January 28th, 2018. Well, the largest Nordic bank pulls a Jamie Dimon on Bitcoin. It's one of our top stories. U.S. government reopens. Here are some of the other stories we're going to cover. Democrats reject President's DACA offer. Dollar falls on Menschen's comments. He's the Treasury Secretary of the United States. 50,000 struck. Page texts go missing. We're going to discuss Textgate and the over 100,000 text messages between the two FBI agents. Twitter warns users on Russian propaganda, and Senator Feinstein and Congressman Schiff say that Russian bots are behind the release the memo hashtag on Twitter that we talked about last week. And the British Prime Minister May vows to do something about Bitcoin. George Soros trashes Bitcoin and Trump at Davos. Gold and silver rebounded nicely during the week. As we mentioned, the largest Nordic bank pulls a Jamie Dimon on Bitcoin. Indian banks suspend crypto exchange accounts. South Korea to tax crypto exchanges. The Swedish central bank says Bitcoin is not money. 400 million were stolen in coins from a Japanese exchange called CoinCheck. $13 million worth of gold was stolen from Brinks. And Perth Mint plans to have blockchain-backed gold. Let's take a look first at gold and silver during the week. Gold closed at just under $13.50 for the week. It was up 1.4%. And silver managed to poke its head higher above $17 to $17.38. We're up 2.2%. Gold-silver ratio dropped a bit, still above 75 to 1. It closed the week at 77.64 to 1. Now, let's take first our Moronica for the week. But this one is, while it is stupidity, and while I think it's moronic that they keep pushing this Russian thing as if it's real, it's disturbing in a sense that they actually have people believing, or trying to get people to believe, and putting a lot of resources behind, that everything that happens on Twitter is somehow manipulated by the Russians. Now, I don't doubt that Russia, but also every country, every entity with an interest, foreign or domestic, does try to influence people's opinions. That's what news agencies do. In fact, what's interesting, before we get into the specifics here, last year, Russia Today showed that Twitter had contacted them during the summer of 2016 with a business development package on how they could use Twitter to help influence the elections. They had a PowerPoint presentation showing how they can buy selected spots. So the idea that only Russia does this and that Russia is the big boogeyman is, it's disturbing, because they're targeting it and they're saying that it's because anyone who likes Trump is a Russian bot. Anyone who has any opinion against Hillary Clinton is a Russian bot, and that you have no legitimate opinions of your own if you disagree with their opinions, because you're obviously influenced by Russian bots. So Twitter sent out an email to about 700,000 users who supposedly had interacted with Russian bots. Now, they don't tell you in the email, I've seen the email, they don't tell you who you interacted with or what particular text you interacted with. They're just putting you on notice in the sense that they're watching you. You may have interacted or somehow been a traitor and helped to elect Donald Trump, because maybe you liked a tweet. You know, maybe you retweeted a tweet, and it probably was something against Hillary, or it may have been something pro-Trump. Who knows? They don't tell you. But the idea that they're trying to tar and feather people who somehow interacted with bots. Now, clearly you could have interacted with bots there's so many bots out there. It's not just Russian bots. And the fact that they're focusing on Russia is a clear indication, I think, of the bias of Twitter. And here's the letter. As part of our recent work to understand Russian-linked activities on Twitter, they've made this a big deal, because every election supposedly the United States has ever had, and any election that most countries have ever had, either foreign countries have tried to influence U.S. elections. We know that they do that. It's not just Russians, it's Chinese and probably Germans. And we know that the United States does the same. But they've elevated this to delegitimize this particular president, in that he was only elected because of Russian interference. And then they add to that, it wasn't just that the Russians were trying to help him, was that they were trying to help them with the implicit and explicit cooperation of the Trump campaign. See, and this letter says consistent with our commitment to transparency. No, there's no transparency. They don't tell you what tweet and what bot you interacted with. Now, what's interesting about this one, this guy says, got accused of linking to Russian accounts during the election. However, this account did not exist during the election. It was opened after the election. So it just looks like they probably pulled all the MAGA accounts or the ones that have flags or guns, just like we saw on the Project Veritas video, and figure, well, they all probably are a bunch of Russians, or at least we want to say that they are. So we're going to send them this email, let them know that we were on to them, and we know. Now, see, actually, look, this IQ Liquid guy, what does he have? An American flag. Obviously a Russian. He's got an American flag. What does that mean? So, therefore, he probably got whatever algorithm they used. I'm sure they didn't match people up and say, okay, let's see, IQ Liquid, he interacted with this, but they didn't do that. They ran it through an algorithm. They probably ran all the flags and images through an algorithm, and they said, well, those are definitely interacting with Russian bots. Now, the reason it's moronic is, as I just explained, it doesn't show or prove anything. It's not helpful in any regard. It's just trying to tag people that are anti-Clinton or pro-Trump as being somehow traitorous, treasonous, or whatever. But the reason it's not funny is you get these morons. Senator Feinstein and Representative Schiff urge Facebook and Twitter to investigate involvement of Russian bots in pushing the Release the Memo campaign. If these reports are accurate, we are witnessing an ongoing attack by the Russian government through Kremlin-linked social media actors. First of all, even if Russian bots were pushing that, it doesn't mean that if you're in favor of releasing this memo, as are 55, 75 congressmen, Donald Trump, oh yeah, but Trump because he's a Russian. The point is, wanting information out in the public has nothing to do with being Russian or Chinese or French or Haitian, has nothing to do with anything. But these people are so wrapped up in pushing this idea that anything you want to do that might damage their point of view, might damage their position, because the Release the Memo is a Republican memo. And the memo supposedly has things in there that are damaging to the Russian investigation. And apparently only one Democrat has even bothered to go and look at the memo. They say it's not worth looking at. They know it's not, so they won't even look at it. And if you want that memo released, here you have Senator Feinstein saying, you're Russian if you're looking at this. Now, apparently Facebook and Twitter looked at this and they said, no, there's really wasn't much Russian bot activity. There was a lot of organic people tweeting, Release the Memo. Now, of course, Dianne Feinstein made it to last week's Moronica because she released some FISA memos that she claimed she released. First, she said she was under pressure, and she didn't say who. And then she said, oh, it's because I had a cold. Okay, so we can use the same rationale for the Release the Memo bots. It was due to flu season. People saw this thing about the memo, and they just started coughing, and next thing you know, people are hitting Release the Memo. This really is Moronica. However, it is disturbing in that they're trying to make this and take this seriously. So the Release the Memo tweets are due to flu season. Too many people had cold. Now, they won't stop. They continue with this Russian thing. They have a new study out. Russian-linked Twitter bots retweeted Trump 10 times more than they retweeted Clinton. First of all, Trump's tweets are far more interesting. He's calling somebody a name. He's saying something. Hillary tweets aren't that interesting. Now, if Russian bots happen to tweet him more, so what? They shadow ban that stuff anyway. So it has no impact whatsoever. Now, here is an interesting one. We have, it looks like we're not catching the images here. There they are. So, Chuck Schumer, 2013, keeping in line with our Moronica or idiocy, Chuck Schumer said in 2013, if Dems shut the government down over immigration, that would be a politics of idiocy. And Chuck Schumer did exactly that, quickly backtracked. He had shut the government down or instructed Democrats not to vote to keep the government open, basically over the DACA proposal, and then they reopened it and they agreed to open it for another 30 days while they discuss it. So he says, we're not going to give in to this type of brinkmanship, which he did. We'll see how things go. Now, here is our top story, at least our headline story. Nordea, which I listed as today's Moronica. Nordea is the largest Nordic bank in, well, it's the largest bank in the Nordic countries. It's located in Sweden. They sent a memo out prohibiting its employees, all employees, not just like top employees or all employees, from owning or trading in Bitcoin. And they had certain things in the memo. If you already have them, maybe you can keep them. Now, this is Jamie Dimon's fantasy. Remember what Jamie Dimon said was, I would fire anyone who trades in Bitcoin. But they never put out a policy at JP Morgan. That was him blowing off some steam. But here's a company, a bank, large bank in the Nordic region, basically saying you can't own Bitcoin. Now, that doesn't make any sense, because I can see maybe they don't want certain key executives for whatever reason not to have them. But some guy or gal works at the bank can't own Bitcoin. I'm not sure that the people who work there and have no vested interest in working there would want to remain there if they happen to have Bitcoin in an account somewhere. They have to sell it because they work there, or they're allowed to keep it, or they can't buy more. So they have to get the top Moronica prize from Smaulgld this week. Can't trade or own Bitcoin. They send a memo out. They're not allowed to trade in Bitcoin. Now, the issue here is it's not, if it was you can't trade in the company's stock, those are all common things because there may be an announcement coming up. They won't want insider trading. But somebody, that's like saying you can't go out on the weekend and have hot dogs. Or you can't, just regulating what an employee can do when it has really no impact on the bank whatsoever. I have this as why never Obama. Now, one of the things, now they came up with this secret society, one of the texts between Strzok and Page, the FBI employees that were working on the Hillary Clinton investigation. One of the things that they had mentioned that it's time to, get into secret society. And that secret society term is laden with a lot of conspiracy theory. So people got really worked up that, these two really are working as the deep state actors and so on. But putting that aside, what's interesting about this whole, and well, I include this in Moronica, in the Hillary Clinton email case, was why Obama never came up in it. Because as the employer, or the boss of Hillary Clinton, he either knew or should have known that she had a private server account. And he also should have been the focus and the subject of the investigation. And he also, I'm sure he knew, and he also there's probably emails between him and Mrs. Clinton on that server. And therefore, he actually used, and he himself may have been involved in passing on classified information. It just seems to me a tremendous oversight to never even mention his name in the Hillary Clinton email investigation. Even the most ardent people who are digging into Hillary Clinton and showing what she did and claiming that they gave her preferential treatment, and quoting Strzok as his changing what she did from gross negligent to extremely careless, to giving her a pass, to giving immunity to certain witnesses, to signing an exoneration letter before the investigation was done, excuse me, by making FBI people working on the case to sign non-disclosure agreements. They clearly were helping her, but the biggest help they gave was by not even making President Obama a subject of the investigation or even as a witness to all this. Because how can you not, if your employee, one of your direct reports is running around doing all this stuff under respondeat superior, you're responsible for her behavior. Because if she's committing these potential crimes or infractions or whatever you want to call them, he is supposed to know about it. And if he isn't, at best, he's a bad manager, and at worst, he's complicit. So I'm still surprised that he has not come up in any serious discussion. I've been mentioning this for years, for the last 2 years, but Smaulgld has a limited footprint. Now, this is LOL. This is probably because of, yes, Bernie Sanders has begun to... There he is. He's going to be wagging his finger at the 1% and run it again maybe in 2020 to take all the money from the 1% and give it to the people. There he is. And I don't think that he has a snowball's chance of getting the Democratic nomination because he didn't stand up to Hillary Clinton. He bowed down, and the Democratic Party is now owned by the same people that put her in. So he's not going to have any chance. He could try to run as a third party. I think it would be chaotic. I think he wouldn't do any better than Ralph Nader, who put up an admirable fight, but managed to swing the election away from the Democratic nominee Al Gore that year, and put Florida barely into George Bush's camp. So I think Bernie Sanders would only be a spoiler, but that's just my opinion. We'll see what happens. Now, UK, this is Theresa May. Now, here's the woman who was tasked with Brexit. The people voted for Brexit. She's still working on it. But of course, this is what I think is moronic. All these countries making pronouncements about doing something about Bitcoin or regulating, and it sends everybody into a tizzy. But what are they going to do? For the most part, everything we've seen, what they do is they say, okay, we're going to tax it. Well, there's no surprise there. They tax anything they can. We're going to regulate it. Yeah, well, that's what they do with just about anything. So they're not talking about banning, arresting, confiscating, but they somehow managed to get the people worried about it, that they're going to do something about it. We're going to take action or something like that. And we see then when they take action, it's basically they issue a memo, they do an investigation. But speaking of investigations, this one came out during the week. And Twitter loves to do this. They put every Time story, a New York Times story, as a trending article. No matter what, anyone's interested or not, it doesn't matter. It's going to be trending because they have it. But this new New York Times article, it's an opinion, and this relates to the memo. Now, what the Republicans did was they got the information from the FISA court warrant. They have some of the text messages. By the way, this Strzok and Page woman exchanged 100,000 text messages in like a 6-month period. Now, they got 50,000 of them retrieved. Another 50,000 they claim they can't retrieve. They've only given Congress, I think, 4,000 to 7,000 of the texts. And they've managed to put together already a fairly damaging profile of what they're talking about, their anti-Trump bias, their pro-Hillary bias, and how it impacted actually what they did. So the idea that the Republicans have put together a memo piecing together what they've already seen, and basically saying, absent to the contrary, information to the contrary, we think that, from what they've kind of hinted, that there was some type of collusion on the part of the FBI and the people in the DOJ to go after Trump on a false Russian narrative and to save Hillary. That's basically what they're hinting at. Now, the New York Times says the whole point of this, quote, game by Devin Nunes and his coterie of conspiracists is to make the job of actual investigators harder while confusing the public about where the scandal lies. Now, the reason that's moronic, unless you're just biased and you want to believe everything that's coming out of the DOJ and the FBI about Trump and Clinton, is then release the information so that people can see it. They're making it sound like they're above the law and that they're just that when people challenge what they say, it makes their job harder. No, it doesn't. Because if you're doing your job and people challenge whether you're doing your job, you should be able to show, yes, you are doing your job. So if the memo is complete nonsense and complete conspiracy theory, then release it. And explain, go through the points and say, well, see, you don't know any better because you haven't read these emails, and here you go. Here are the other emails. Now you're wrong. But they don't want to do that. Probably, my guess is, because they know that they are wrong. They know that the memo probably is on to something. So to say that it's either a Russian bot or now these people are just conspiracy theorists, that's the last vestige of when you don't have an argument, you just have to label your opponent something that's distasteful or something you've created. First of all, there's nothing distasteful about being a Russian. I never heard that being a Russian, or of any, actually, if you take the politically correct point of view, there's nothing wrong with being of any nationality. But they've made now being Russian some type of bad thing. And also, if you question the FBI, the DOJ, they make that out to be conspiracy theory, and but worse, working for the Russians. Now, these deleted texts, the reason they're first of all, 100,000 texts. I was just looking at my Twitter account, and I think I'm a prodigious Twitterer. I have about 100,000 tweets over 5 years. These people had 100,000, and I do other things, obviously, have a job and so on. These people supposedly have a job and do other things, but in 5 months, they had 100,000 texts. So that is just an enormous, and obviously they have work to do, they have other things to do. So 100,000 texts is an enormous amount. Even if they release them or they find them, it's just going to take weeks or months for people to, I mean, I would not use, a lot of times what they do with these, when they do a review of texts and emails, and this is what they did in the Clinton investigation, they look for keywords. Well, if people are talking in half code, you can look for keywords and never find them. So really, the best investigative way to review large amounts of texts and emails is actually to read all of them. Personally, sit down and go through them and read them all. Take notes on if there's certain repeating phrases, because that may give you indication of a code. But you know, they could be calling something something without calling it a secret society, without calling it a conspiracy, without calling it... And then, of course, there's obvious things that if you just read them, you'll find stuff that maybe they have their own words for derogatory things. So in any event, the issue is that they claim that they've lost them, and this is beyond ridiculous because the FBI, in today's day and age, you should not be able to lose 50,000 text messages. It almost sounds, with one of the guys, one of the congressmen, the dog ate my homework. In today's day and age where you can retrieve the phones, you can search the phones, you can search the carrier, the backup systems, it's almost unbelievable. Someone say, I lost the data, especially when it's on a network, as this apparently was. I mean, the IRS, well, first, I think the IRS said they destroyed the emails. I don't even think they claimed they had lost them. But failing to preserve the text is the FBI. I mean, these people... That's what they're supposedly best at, is preserving evidence. So Representative Jim Jordan had a problem with that. Sarah Carter saying incredible that I think she's a reporter at Fox. Oh, you see, and that's the other thing. If a reporter says something that's factual, but he or she happens to be from, let's say, Huffington Post. Well, I don't like the Huffington Post, so nothing they say could be true. Or she's from the Fox News. Nothing that they say could be true. Or it's biased. See, I always look at it and say, is the person saying something truthful or not? Yes, consider the source. But most people in today's environment just consider the source. And they won't listen to anything, even if it's truthful, if it comes from a source that they don't like. So if the New York Times actually comes out and reports on something truthfully, and it's a fact, I will put that fact into my pile of facts that I'm going to analyze things from. But most people don't do that. They say, it comes from the New York Times, I'm not listening, it comes from... And there's reason for that, because a lot of times, Fox News, New York Times, they all make up stuff. They add their own spin to it. But there are certain facts, and what she's saying here at Fox News, it is incredible that 5 months of FBI text messages between Page and Strzok no longer exist. She's not a conspiracy theory for making that observation. It's a conspiracy theorist. She's not biased for making that observation. That's a fact. Now, it helps her bias that she can make that factual statement. But it's still a fact that, or at least something that should be agreed upon and remarked, or remarkable for most people, that in today's day and age, you don't just lose 5 months of text unless there's a reason to have lost them. And I would think most people would, it's like when you see your child leaving, coming off of a chair, and the cookie jar is open, and his hands are behind his back, and you say, what are you doing? And he says nothing. And you say, what's behind your hands? And he says nothing. And Okay, you don't know that he has cookies in his hand, but there's enough reason to believe that there is. So enough here to say we want to see what's going on. And it's the classic example of, these are the 5 months. These are the 5 months of text messages that we want to see. 50,000 text messages that they found. They're only showing 4,000 to 7,000 of them. They claim they lost another 50,000. And here you have the representatives. They're not Russian bots. They are representatives in Congress who are saying that they need to see the text. Remember, the text that they have seen talked about an insurance policy, anti-Trump insurance policy, and now they're looking at the period that's missing is basically the part of the plan where if there was some plan for an insurance policy, that it would start to play out. And those are the text messages that are missing. And in today's day and age, it just seems impossible that they could, quote, as this guy says, magically lose the text messages, especially during the period of time when those are probably the most important messages when they're putting their plan in place. And then text messages that they have is once Mueller's been appointed. Well, that's, if you remember, what James Comey, when he testified, said was, yeah, he wanted to like get some information on Trump for the purposes of appointing a special counsel. So it looks like all along they wanted to get this they wanted to create the Russian narrative and then investigate the Russian narrative. And once they did that, and that's where all the conspiracy messages would be, then they all of a sudden they found the ones since Mueller was appointed. And again, it's not that hard to find these text messages. But the DOJ now says they're beginning to probe missing anti-Trump text messages, will leave no stone unturned. Now, I don't know how hard it could be. I mean, if you're the Department of Justice, you're the Attorney General of the United States, you can subpoena the phones, you can bring these people in for questioning. There's a lot of forensic ways you can impound the FBI servers. So I don't know what they're talking about here. It seems to me if they really wanted these messages, they could have them. Also, if they really wanted them to be released to the public, they can have them too. Now, here's another representative. This is the dog ate my homework level excuse. Americans deserve to know if there was rampant antitrust bias and if there was a effort to cover it up. So again, now they're looking for a special counsel to look at this particular issue, which is the issue of, was there a conspiracy to allow Hillary Clinton to go free? And was there a conspiracy to create a Russian narrative and then to investigate Russia? So now you got investigations flying on both sides. And this guy's also pointing out that they're missing the 5 months of text messages, and then they come right back online when the day the Mueller investigation began. Now, there was this concept, as we mentioned, the secret society. That may just be, you get a heightened sense of attention when you hear about secret society. These could have been discussions about themselves, secret society. Who knows? But again, when you don't have the full story and you don't have all the documents, what do you expect? People are going to fill in the blanks or try to fill in the blanks, and unless they release all the text messages, and they don't have to release them to the public, WikiLeaks or something like that, but the Congress should look at them and they should create their interpretations and memos, and they can debate them and get out in the open what exactly is happening in order to try to regain confidence in the Department of Justice and the FBI. Now, Gowdy says here, he's another representative. Today we saw a text about not keeping texts. And there's a reason for that as well. Donald Trump jumps in on the same story. He notices that 5 months worth of struck page text, perhaps 50,000 all in all in prime time, are missing. Now, people say this isn't good, Trump shouldn't be tweeting. This is one of the best things Trump does, is because whether you like him or not, he is trying, by constantly tweeting, he's drawing attention and putting light on these issues, which, if the mainstream media is complicit in trying to cover up the DOJ and the FBI's work, then it would not get the same attention. And in fact, if Hillary Clinton had won, we wouldn't know any of this. So there's a thing on the Secret Society. Now here's a deer in the headlight. Jeff Sessions talking about he's going to fully investigate how the FBI failed to preserve 5 months of text messages. Well, I don't know if he's going to do that, because leave no stone unturned. I mean, he could issue an order and they could be impounding servers and subpoenaing people and getting the devices. So I don't know what they're doing, but at least he's saying something like that. There's even talk that FBI agents threaten physical harm to the presidents in the missing texts. Now, we don't know what's in those texts. He could just be talking nonsense. But we don't know unless we can get a look at the text. And here's Trump talking about 50,000 important text messages. And again, 50,000 text messages missing, 50,000 that they've recovered, only 4,000 to 7,000 that they've turned over to Congress. I've had 104,000 tweets in 5 years. So this is an enormous amount of text messages that they need to go through each and every one of them, not searching for key terms. The best way to do it is to just one by one go through them, look at them in context. I know that when they do investigations, sometimes they don't do that. They just try to search for keywords, and if people are speaking in code, you may never, unless you read them all, you're not going to probably get actually the sense or what really is going on and be able to piece together anything unless you take a look at all the text messages and you actually read them instead of trying to scan them. Also, in the text messages that they did find, it showed that Strzok and Page were concerned about their work. Obviously, if Donald Trump had won, they needed an insurance policy. We discussed that, and we don't know exactly what that plan was, but it looks like that plan was to create the Russian narrative and get a special counsel appointed. So, but then they were also concerned if Hillary Clinton won. Now, if she won, reading between the lines, it looks like, well, then maybe Hillary would be on the rampage against them for investigating at all. I mean, how dare they, being in the FBI, investigate, even though they're on her side. She may not look at it that way. She may think, what's going on here? I'm going to have to purge you people. Now, they asked Trey Gowdy, the congressman, if he thought that that's what they meant. And he says, well, maybe it's not that. Maybe they thought what Hillary would be annoyed at was that the DOJ was a lot nicer to her than the FBI, and they would get less special favors. So, but again, if we want to know what they meant by that, issue a subpoena and talk to them. What did you mean by this? You're in charge of, Strzok was, of working on the investigation into Hillary Clinton. Why did you do certain things? Why did you change the language from gross negligence to extremely careless? Why are you saying these types of things? What did you mean? And that would be a very helpful exercise to undergo. So having looked at all this, and I asked them, these are my Twitter followers, so you can see where their mentality is. Which collusion happened in 2016? Was it mainstream media and FBI, DOJ for Hillary, or was it Russian collusion for Trump? Now, my followers say 91% said the collusion was on the mainstream media, FBI for Hillary, and only 9% said Russians for Trump. So there's a clear split in how people are viewing what happened. And we saw with the New York Times reporter, if you are a Trump supporter, you believe that the mainstream media and the DOJ and the FBI had it in for helping Hillary, and that they were working against Trump. And if you are a Hillary supporter, you believe that the investigation was all above board. It exonerated Hillary as it should have done. It was nothing but a far-right conspiracy in the first place to even challenge her. And obviously the Russians are the ones who deserve all the scrutiny. So we're in a situation now where basically you have wide swaths of the country that have totally differing points of view on what's out there. And that's partially because there's only part of the information is out there. So people pick the side they want and they believe the narrative that's there. And a lot of these narratives are either fake, partially fake, or they're just not fully baked. And the only way we're going to get to the bottom of what happened is by really an investigation into the investigation and a releasing of and a criticism of and examination of these memos that the Republicans have, and then also of text messages between these two. And from reading these two text messages, the 50,000 are missing, I'm sure you're going to bring in, if not already, they already know, other players into the whole mix, and we'll learn more about what happened. Now, Trump is complaining about his guys at the Justice Department. Why won't they do his bidding? He's basically saying, why won't the Justice Department really agree to release the memo? Why won't they get these text messages? And it's interesting that he calls it the Trump Justice Department, but a lot of these people are holdovers from the Obama and even the Bush administration. Now, where does this all lead? I think here's what's going to happen. Trump is going to give his State of the Union on Tuesday night. And in that State of the Union, I think that he is going to tout the economic statistics of the United States. He's going to talk about the stock market. He's going to talk about low unemployment. He's especially going to call out low unemployment amongst African Americans, lowest ever, low unemployment amongst Hispanic Americans. Then he's going to talk about the state of the budget, his infrastructure plans. He's going to go after the Democrats for shutting down the government over DACA. He's going to paint them as being interested only in the rights of illegal immigrants, illegal aliens. He's going to mention how he presented a reasonable plan for DACA to allow the children of illegal immigrants to find a path to citizenship over 10 to 12 years, and that was rejected. So basically, he's going to say the United States is doing well, the Democrats are obstructionists. And then I believe what's going to happen is, I think that memo will either be released sometime before the speech, immediately prior to the speech, or maybe even after. But if it's released before, I think he will then say all these accomplishments were done despite of this phony Russian collusion narrative, and then he'll start reading from the memo that that the Republicans wrote that would make people stand up and take notice, and it'd be very hard for the mainstream media to ignore the memo. They'd have to attack the memo, but they'd have to first say what's in the memo, and many people would have seen the president's speech. So instead of just saying it's Russian bots that want to release the memo may have already been released. And if it is as shocking as people say, then I think it may be a very interesting night. Now, if the memo is not released before Tuesday, I don't think he's going to be the one to start talking about what's in the memo. He might not have even seen the memo. I think he would not be the one to release the memo at the State of the Union. Or they may decide to release the memo afterwards to allow the speech to sink in, or to divert attention. Because I know that they're going to have the Stormy Daniels, supposed porn star, had an affair with Donald Trump in 2006, I believe. They want to put that on immediately after the speech to kind of draw attention. Because if you remember, after the first Trump State of the Union speech, even the left-wing media, mainstream media, was praising the speech. Van Jones said he was the president tonight for the first time. He had called out and recognized the spouses of fallen heroes. Apparently, it was a speech that went over very well. And they have to have something, if the speech goes over well on the economy, to counter any good feelings that may happen as a result of this speech. But again, this is the Trump Justice Department, so to speak. Justice Department won't show Congress all agents' text. They're claiming that the text between Page and Plant, that's what I'm thinking, Strunk and Page, are personal, and therefore they can't be released. The problem with that, though, is oftentimes when you have personal messages, it's very hard to separate a personal message and a private message when both of the employees are working on the same thing. So you could have things that are a blend of personal and private. So it's not really a good excuse. They really need not to turn over the 50,000 missing texts to the public, but that at least to a congressional committee so they can sift through them. And then, of course, if they want to separate the personal stuff, has nothing to do with what they're looking for anyway. So you do want to limit the number of people that see the personal stuff. But that's the secondary objective. The primary objective is to find out what's in those messages, and you don't want somebody else to say, well, these are personal, so you can't see them, well, then you might not be able to put pieces together, because obviously if someone can say this is personal, you can't see it, it may contain some very important information that's not necessarily personal. So Trump then goes to Davos, and presidents generally don't go to Davos. Davos is where the globalists go, talk about fixing the world. And the last president, U.S. president to go, I think, was Bill Clinton. I guess that's when it started, you know, with the Chinese deals and NAFTA and so on. Trump goes and he starts talking about America first. And he presented a vision of globalism, which involves each country pursuing its own aims, and thereby, if they're successful, then the globe will be successful, which is counter to global coordination in order for global success. And it's basically the same concept as the free market, that economies do better when people are serving their own interests rather than serving the collective interest, because in the pursuit of their own interests, the way people will interact, everyone will be better off. So he's presenting that on a national view, that the best way to make global prosperity is for each country to take somewhat of a America first policy towards their own, and rather than trying to coordinate a global strategy. Now, George Soros went and he attacked Bitcoin and Donald Trump, and that's one of my subscribers, Fernando, wrote that that's probably the best endorsement for Bitcoin if Soros doesn't like it. He called Trump a danger to the world. Now, obviously, Soros has done well by navigating through funding organizations, large organizations, global organizations, funneling money to influence organizations, and so on. So the concept of decentralization via Bitcoin, or even a breakdown of a top-down globalist structure to just a nationalist structure, which is already pretty monolithic, that is a threat to George Soros. So Bitcoin and Trump, we can see why he doesn't like what's going on there. Dollar collapse. For all you people talking about dollar collapse, game over, game changer, end of dollar hegemony. Daniel Lacalle, he's a Spanish professor. He writes for Mises from time to time. He's noting here that U.S. is expected to pass Saudi Arabia in oil production in 2018. About a year ago, I wrote an article how the U.S. dollar was going to become the petrodollar backed by U.S. oil. The amount of oil production in the United States over the last 3 years, the increase has been staggering, as he's mentioning here. U.S. may become the #1 oil producer, but not just that. The United States is exporting increasing amounts of oil. I think by the end of this year, they may become like 4th or 5th place behind or ahead of Iran. And then if that's the case, the petrodollar becomes less and less important. The original reason for the petrodollar was people would need to hold dollars so they can buy oil. It's not the reason why people hold dollars today. They hold them as reserves for not just to buy oil. They have far more dollar reserves than they need to buy oil. Of course, under the petrodollar, you need to have dollars because under those agreements, Saudi Arabia only prices and accepts dollars for payment. But the oil trading is only 8 to 12, 15% of overall global trade. And now, if the United States becomes a major oil exporter and becomes bigger than Saudi Arabia, well, then you're still going to need dollars to buy U.S. oil. So there's all this talk about petro yuan, and it's a lot more. The dollar's hegemony is a lot more about people wanting a stable reserve asset than it is about having to have dollar assets to buy oil. And I think that'll become quite clear. Here he mentions again, Daniel Lacalle, the dollar is not only the most traded currency in the world, but its use has increased from 2013 from 87% to 87.6% of global transactions. And here he is in his own article on his De Lacalle, which is daniellaccalle.com. Here's Trump talking about believing in a free-floating currency. So first, Munchkin, or whatever his name is, the Treasury Secretary, says maybe a lower dollar is good for America. And then Trump says, no way, Jose. And so when Munchkin talks, the dollar index goes down. And then the dollar index rises after Trump talks, and it goes back down. There's only so much this yakking can do. But The dollar index declining has nothing to do with dollar collapse. Remember, the dollar index is basically just the dollar value versus other fiat currencies. And mostly, what makes up the dollar index is the euro, the yen. I think there's a pound and the Swedish krona in there. But the point is that they always trade within a range. And the United States did the first big, massive QE, lowered interest rates, took them down to zero, and the dollar fell. When the Fed started making noises about stopping QE, tapering QE, ending QE, then raising interest rates, and then lowering their balance sheet, the dollar took off. It went from the low 70s all the way up to about 100, 110, and the euro and the yen fell. All the other currencies fell against the dollar. But what happened when the United States ended QE? Well, the next day, Japan started a massive QE. A few months later, Europe, EU, European Central Bank began their first QE ever and lowered interest rates. This is all coordinated. They're all fiat currencies. They all have massive debt problems. It's not like the United States dollar is going to collapse. It's only going lower versus the other fiat currencies that have exactly the same, if not worse, issues than the United States in terms of unfunded liabilities, borrowing too much money. And that's what they're all doing. And this is now just the time in the cycle where the dollar goes down against these currencies. And now the ECB is in a position where they claim, Draghi came out during the week and said they reaffirmed they're going to start tapering their bond purchases, and they're not just buying sovereign bonds. They've run out of those to buy, so they're now buying corporate bonds, privately issued corporate bonds. Japan buys all the Bank of Japan bonds. They're still doing it, but then Draghi says he may increase QE in size or duration. Now, why would he do that? Well, he might have to, because if the ECB were to stop buying bonds and would decide they're going to raise interest rates, taper QE, well, then their currency would get stronger. They can't have that. They don't want that. All the central banks' mindsets are they want inflation and they want a weaker currency. They don't want to win the currency war and have the highest valued currency. It hurts them in their minds. Inflation helps them in their minds. So, Japan, Bank of England, ECB, Swiss National Bank, United States Federal, they all work together to make sure that the dollar isn't going to collapse. Because if the dollar index would go down to 30 or 20, it would be chaos for the rest of the currencies too. Chaos for the rest of the economies. So that's not going to happen. They will, what the United States will do, Fed will do, will continue to raise interest rates. Capital will continue to pour into the United States as a result of Davos. Trump went to Davos and said America is open for business. It's not just going to be all the money that's held overseas by U.S. corporations that's going to come back into the United States, but you're going to get foreign capital coming into the United States. The dollar will rebound, and the Fed will raise interest rates, and that'll help the dollar rebound. And these other countries, Japan, ECB, which is not a country, but it's the European Central Bank, Bank of England, all the other central banks will continue their loose policies, and the exchange rate mechanisms will all balance out. Same with China. China's on a massive debt spending, and they're not going to stop. They were talking about stopping, but they realize if they stop, their growth stops. They have to spend increasing amounts of, or print increasing amounts of yen to keep their economy going. The problem is they're trying to shift from an industrial economy to a services economy where they consume more and they build less. The problem is the real growth that they know they can get is from the spending, and they've pretty much run out of, well, they already have printed yuan and built more roads and bridges than they could possibly use over the next 20 years. So now they're trying to extend that into the Belt and Road Initiative. So China's in a massive case where they can't stop printing and borrowing. Where the United States, in a sense, is going to come off as the prudent central bank. I know that sounds strange, because they're the ones who have actually stopped the QE. They're the ones who have raised the interest rates, and they might even start selling off a few bonds, whereas the rest of the world is printing like mad and has interest rates low. So I wouldn't expect the dollar index to continue to fall, and it's certainly not going to collapse. There's where that Trump bump is over the day. The dollar index now negative. Litecoin is life. Now, Zbay, India's top currency exchange, it's trading support for Litecoin. Bitcoin. Now here, Japan has no problem whatsoever with Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies. Totally legal, totally regulated. Now Japan's largest exchange is launching in Europe. Stock trading app Robinhood, just stocks, is now adding Bitcoin and Ethereum to the trade. That was big news during the week in 5 U.S. states. Again, these countries want a piece of the action. They want a cut of their taxes, and they know that the banks also want a cut of the fees. So I say here, rate crypto regulation. All this regulation talk, scaring crypto investors, is nonsense. Countries just want their tax cut of the gains. They know that it's hard to ban it. It costs more resources to ban it. They gain no tax revenues if they ban it. And also they know that if they can convince people to trade on exchanges that they can figure out how to regulate, that most people, the average investor, is just going to trade their Bitcoin no differently, and they wouldn't expect to trade it any differently and pay taxes on the gains any differently than if they were trading IBM and Apple stock along with their Bitcoin. Sure, some people are going to decide they don't want to pay taxes. Some people are going to use Bitcoin for money laundering. But those people are going to money launder whether Bitcoin is banned or not banned. In fact, if it's banned, it makes no difference to them whatsoever. So governments know that banning something generally doesn't stop illegal activity, because the people that do illegal activity are fully aware that they're committing crimes, and they're going to do it anyway. So they learn through prohibition the best thing to do with cigarettes. Anything they don't want you to do is better to regulate it and collect tax cut than it is to try to ban it. So I think it's actually, regulation is a good thing for cryptocurrencies, not for people who want to end central banking through cryptocurrency, make people have their own central bank in their pocket and conduct transactions that are permissionless, conduct transactions that are anonymous, conduct transactions that are tax-free. No, that part of regulation is definitely not good if that's how you view Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. But if you view cryptocurrencies purely as an avenue to get in on someone of the ground floor to make gains, as if you were buying the next IPO or ICO, then the regulation is a good thing for crypto investors, because it shows that the governments want to provide a framework for which to allow these cryptocurrencies to be traded and to allow them to collect their taxes. So anytime I see someone come out and there's some regulation scare, I don't know why that's scary at all. The banning talk should be scary, but we haven't really seen, well, we've had rumors of banning talk. We haven't seen any country really ban it, other than countries that are outside of the circle of the largest 20 economic countries, other than China. And you can expect that from China. China banned the exchanges, but China is a top-down economy. They want nothing. They want to control everything. So it's not surprising they've done that. And also, China has an interest which the other countries don't have, is capital control. People in China know that their government, at a moment's notice, can institute devaluation of the yuan, and that's the last thing they want. Why do you think all this Chinese money has left the country? Why do you think Vancouver home prices are expensive? Why do you think most of the trading in the world in Bitcoin went on in China? Because Chinese people know that they don't have faith in the yuan, and they know that the yuan could be devalued, and they wanted to get their money out. So it makes sense that China clamped down on cryptocurrencies. All right, so here, por supuesto, regulation is pro-crypto. Now, India, so these are the types of regulation things that do happen, but again, they have nothing to do with Bitcoin. They have to do with what's happening around Bitcoin. So, for example, India suspended the top bank suspended the bank accounts of Bitcoin exchanges in India. What they're concerned about with the exchanges is, do the exchanges know the customers? Do they know where the customers got the money? Do they know where the customers are sending their funds? What they don't want is money coming in and out of exchanges that they can't really track, because it's either come from a foreign country, it's come from an illegal source. So they want to take a look at this. See, just by banning it, then they lose the transaction fees and the taxes on 95, 99% of the transactions that are thoroughly legitimate. All they're trying to do through regulation is to tax what they deem legal transactions and then try to catch what they deem are illegal transactions. Now, Bitcoin's a pretty big deal in India. A lot of people in India don't have bank accounts. I think it's like 40, 50%. So when they want to go cashless, it's difficult if they want to have them use bank cards, because most Indians, not most, but a lot of the rural areas don't have bank accounts at all. They hold gold as their store of wealth, and many of them, can now use Bitcoin. 1 in 10 transactions of Bitcoin happens in India. There's the Nordea story we already talked about, how they banned Bitcoin trading and ownership for its 30,000 plus employees. Now, here's a very important point. South Korea to tax crypto exchanges 24.2% in line with existing tax policy. So they're going to get taxed. Sure, they're going to get taxed, but that's good. They're going to get taxed no more, no less than any other company in South Korea, which is kind of an indication that they don't want to ban. And here's what Zerohead says. Korea to begin real name cryptocurrency trading on January 30th. Well, then he says outright ban of crypto trading is no longer on the table. Of course not, because in an unregulated exchange, we're not even going to talk about decentralized exchanges, where if you just got a regular exchange, centralized exchange, but you don't have to give your name, well, that's going to bother the South Korean government. Why? You collect your money and no one knows that you collected it, and they don't get their tax amount. And you can money launder, criminals can be on there anonymously. So all that South Korea is trying to do is get a handle on it. And one way they do it is if you can't have anonymous accounts. And I guess what they're telling the exchanges are, if you have anonymous accounts, you've got to contact them and get them to add a name to the account. And you've got to check them out. And probably what they're saying then is, and if they don't, close their accounts, take their big. Now, the thing about that is there's ways around that. They can, the anonymous accounts. Well, what they could have done, the exchanges they could do is they can block withdrawals now from anonymous accounts. I'm sure that's happening. And then the way you get your account back is you have to present all the information and IDs in order to do it. That's regulation, but that is only going to affect a certain number of people, a certain percentage of people, a certain type of investor, who I believe is no longer driving the Bitcoin market. Yes, in the beginning, maybe it was all people who were very idealistic, all people who wanted to be anonymous, or maybe even criminals. But that's not where the bulk of the 30, 40, 50 million Bitcoin traders are today. Most of them are there just to try to get price action increases. They don't have much else to think about in terms of philosophy or hiding or criminal intent. They're just trying to make money off of an asset that's rising. And I think that's the people the government wants to regulate on the behalf of and to collect their money in taxes. All right, so here we are. We're very seriously considering action on Bitcoin. This is Theresa May. She should consider action on Brexit. It's been 2 years. So who knows what she means by considering action. Not very effective on Brexit, so I don't expect them to be very effective on action that she may take with Bitcoin. Now, what's interesting is I did do an article after having read Treasury, UK Treasury white paper, where they had done research, and Bitcoin is the lowest on their list for money laundering. Money laundering in England is done through nail parlors and done with cash. It's done with prepaid cards. It's done through lawyers and accountants setting up structures. Very little is done through Bitcoin. There's very few places you can go and wash your money with Bitcoin. So taking action, I think those are just empty words. And I think action may be just greater regulation on exchanges. Who knows? Now here's the Bitcoin. This is the central bank of Sweden. I think it's called the Riksbank. Yeah, there it is. Riksbank, who's state bank. She says Bitcoin could be called an asset, just don't call it money. Well, why not? Bitcoin has all the characteristics of money, but of course, I think where she's coming from is money is something that is competition to what we issue, and so call it something else. Now, interesting, I know about a year ago, Bank decided that certain notes, this didn't get much attention. This actually happened before the rupee demonetization. They basically said all the old Swedish notes in circulation, they were the larger notes, they're not going to be valid anymore. But all you have to do is bring them to Sweden, to the bank, and we'll give you, over the next year, ending sometime this summer, they announced this last summer, and you can get the new notes. But there's stories of people who have saved these notes. In order to get your money back, you're to allow these notes to get the new notes, you have to be able to show where you got the money, which may be hard to show 20, 30 years later. If you've been if you've been saving money, there was a story of a grandmother with a shoebox full of these notes, and they wouldn't take them because she didn't have receipts. She couldn't explain where she got the money from. She didn't remember. So basically, they were concerned she was money laundering, and that's the argument they give in their releases. You got to say, and also they ask you, why didn't you spend it? That's hard to answer. Well, maybe because I was trying to save it, and if you can't answer why you didn't spend it, you don't have a receipt for how you got the money, you don't remember how you got the money, then they're not going to exchange your notes. So this type of action is another type of endorsement for Bitcoin, because you don't need to explain to anybody why you have it or what you're going to do with it. You may have to explain it to a government, but in order to use it, you don't. You have it, you spend it, you want it, you get it. There's no third party that has to approve of it, and there's no new Bitcoin that you have to exchange for old Bitcoin. They may have forks, but that's different. You still get the fork, where if you had the Bitcoin before the fork, you also get the forked coin. So that's the Swedish view on here. Now, this biggest theft in crypto history is $400 million stolen from Japanese crypto exchange. This one was, I think it was called CoinCheck. Now, that's a huge amount of money. Like when you have gold heists, it's not a big deal. Here's Soros, Bitcoin threat. It's not a currency. Again, Soros has made a fortune dealing with these large organizations. That's how he makes his money. So Bitcoin is decentralized. There's nothing for him. There's nothing in it for him. If it undermines the government, he can't. There's nothing for him to bribe. There's nothing for him to fund. It's not a good thing for George Soros. 400 million. Now, there's a gold mining collapse in Uzbekistan. Before we get to the gold heist, there's just a point on gold. I have been saying that gold is not money. And the reason I say that is because it fails the test of being, it can be used in transactions, but it's not. And therefore it has the properties of money. It's not. People say gold's been money for 5,000 years, period. And I say horses have been transportation for 5,000 years. Now, that doesn't mean that horses are not valuable anymore. It doesn't mean gold isn't valuable anymore. It means that their use for 5,000 years may no longer be a use. That doesn't mean that there are not other uses for horses. There's not other uses for gold. Gold is a store of value. Gold is good portfolio insurance, but it's not really good money to exchange. People don't go down to the corner shop with a tenth of an ounce coin, buy a cup of coffee, pack of cigarettes, whatever they're going to do. People complain, you must have a motive, you must have some agenda. I don't have an agenda. I do like gold, but I'm pointing out the facts that gold has lost its value as a transactional currency. The value that gold has is not because you can use it as money or as a currency. It's that you can hold it, save it. You can even use it as jewelry. You could sell it for its monetary, industrial, whatever it is. You have something that's rare, it's valuable, with unique properties. Horses are also still valuable, but rich people don't own them, so they can go to work. So just a point that I constantly run up against. People take very much, see, people that are really into gold, they take offense, or silver, but their silver is so valuable. Well, yeah, so is copper, so is nickel. It all depends on relative value. How much value do you ascribe to something being useful? How much value do you ascribe to a 5,000-year history? At some point, there's a cap on the price of everything. How much money do you pay for a horse? It doesn't mean I'm against horses, I'm against gold, I'm against Bitcoin if I point out the limitations of any of them. Same with Bitcoin people. You tell them it's not a store of value, you tell them it doesn't have intrinsic value, they go bonkers and tell you, yes, it does, it's digital gold. You tell them you can't make a necklace out of it, it doesn't matter, it's digital gold. You tell them you can't use it in electronics, doesn't matter, it's digital gold. You cannot, for some people, once they're in the church of Bitcoin, the church of gold, the church of silver, they can't accept that the sky is not the limit and that their asset class has anything you can possibly want and that any other asset class is used. There's silver people that think gold, oh, gold is just like a curiosity. There's gold people who think that silver is, you might as well be collecting tin cans. And there's Bitcoin people that think that gold is a barbarous relic. So, you know, on this channel, I try to give the pros and cons, and there are cons. There's no way they're not cons to Bitcoin, to gold, and to silver, and to our friends, the horses. Of course, dogs have no downside. Now, Austria. This is another point that's been going on for the last few years. Insatiable appetite for gold-backed ETFs. When we talk about gold demand in the West, in Australia, Europe, they buy ETFs. They're not buying the gold bullion coins or bars. Now, here's something I published. I published every month directly from the Russian Central Bank's spreadsheet, their additions to gold reserves. Been doing it about 2 or 3 years. It's very popular in the alternative media. Often gets picked up in Zero Hedge, SGT Report, all the major alternative media platforms. And of course, it's the red meat. It's the people who are gold bugs. They see it. They're like, yeah, Russians, they're just buying gold. They're going to back the ruble with gold. Russia understands gold. Russia is preparing for what's coming. And I try to point out that, yes, Russia now has the 6th largest gold hoard in the world. They got 1,838 tons. They added 223 tons, a record amount for them in 2017. But I also point out where they got that gold. They basically are the 2nd or 3rd largest gold producing nation in the world. And basically, it's smart. Instead of the ruble, they convert they buy from their own mines. They don't import this gold. They basically take their production and they buy it and add it to their reserves. Makes sense. Why sell that gold, get dollars or yuan or rupees for it, and then store that as reserves? They might as well just take the gold directly and put that in reserves. So they do that. Yes, that's a great thing. It's not a negative for gold. And also, the remaining gold that they have, they sell to China. They've arranged to sell a certain amount of gold to China, and they're also working with China to develop more of their gold mining production in Russia. However, despite all this wonderful gold activity of production and purchasing as a central bank, the value of their gold reserves are only $77 billion. Now, $77 billion, if you're paying attention to world economic global finance, is nothing. It's less than a month of QE when the Fed was doing QE3. $77 billion. It's really not much. In fact, Russia, who's not a major holder of U.S. treasuries and is an enemy in many respects of the United States, they hold $105 billion worth of U.S. treasuries. So they have more in U.S. treasuries than they have in gold. Now, Zero Hedge covered my article here. You can see here. They didn't use my chart this time. They used his own chart. I think he wanted to show this line. You'll see the chart that I used was a different chart. The chart, see, there's Lewis Cameron of Smaulgld. The chart I used showed, I think it was a little, you'll see, it's a better looking chart than the one that he made. But the one that the Zero Hedge wanted to point out in the article was a lot different than what and that's why he didn't just publish my article. He just cited Smaulgld as the source. I pointed out that all this gold is worth $77 billion, or less than 18% of their overall reserves. But I pointed out that they actually have more in U.S. treasuries, and I mentioned that their holdings topped $100 billion for the 8th month in a row. Now, what the way the story was portrayed on Zero Hedge was that basically they were adding gold, but they weren't adding treasuries, and that's not true. See, Russian gold reserves are now worth 76 billion. That's the number I gave them, or 17.7% of overall Russian reserves. Meanwhile, Russian hold of U.S. Treasury were just above 100 billion for the 8th month in a row. Now, if you look at the chart here, yeah, but if you go back from a year ago, see, this is disingenuous, is that since October, they've gone from 74 billion to 105, and now they've kept that up, here. So yes, they are adding gold now, for at least for the last 8 months, at a better pace than they are adding U.S. treasuries, but still, their treasury holdings are much greater than their gold holdings. But to throw the red meat out to the gold crowd, you got to mention that Russia is just they're only interested in gold. So nowhere is it mentioned that the Russian treasury position has been increasing, and it's gone up faster, at least over the last year, than the gold. See, if you go down here, 74 billion to 105, they leveled off. So what Russia is doing is they're balancing out their foreign reserves. And of course, they're adding gold. But again, the amount of gold they have, as large as it is, it's not much in the grand scheme of things. Nor is there 105 billion in treasuries. They could sell all those tomorrow, and it wouldn't have much of an impact on the treasury market. That's how liquid the treasury market is. But there's the Zero Hedge story on it. Perth Mint plans a blockchain-backed gold. So I guess they're going to track all of the, which is a good thing. It gives you more trust, you would imagine. I don't know how it works, how they track each bar. I still think once you start tracking a physical item on the blockchain, if that blockchain is centralized and can be tampered with, then it's just a ledger that just happens to be called the blockchain. Lana Silver Temple. I want to check that out on Bangkok Post. That's beautiful. You normally see gold temples. That's a silver temple. Coeur d'Alene is a major silver producer. They had a company record. So all this talk about silver production is way down. No, it's not. Last 3 years, it's been near record highs, over 850 million ounces produced. Probably, maybe this year be a little bit down, but it's certainly, there are pockets where the production is still up. Now, Gold Pumper, this is the section where I try to remind people of the stories we have heard over the past few years about pumping gold and silver. They're fake news, basically. COMEX default is coming soon. This was in 2016. We heard that story in 2013, 2015, 2016. Vaults are empty. Almost empty. Default possible in December. Then there was this one in 2016. We're going to run out of silver in 2016. This guy's now promoting Bitcoin, and silver is now something that doesn't believe in at all, even though we almost ran out. We were going to, guaranteed, we were running out of silver. 2016, don't forget this one. Major event to create massive gold price surge in 26 days. This was sometime in 2017, never happened. Oh, well, what about this one? $1,500 silver. Buy a house or a city block with a few monster boxes of silver. Then there was Gold's Game Changer, the gold back yuan. Yes, you're going to be able to walk into the Shanghai Gold Exchange with your yuan and take gold under the yuan-denominated oil futures contract. It was the game changer for gold. This is it, the final rinse. Elites are losing control. This was sometime in early 2017. A historic moment from a physical market perspective. This is different. Riveting 52-minute interview. I just remind people of this because people eat this stuff up when it comes out. They repeat it. It gets published in 20 or 30 different sources. People believe it. And then they forget about it. But at the time you try to tell people this is nonsense, they argue with you. Oh, are you kidding me? You got to check this out. Yeah, check it out. It's wrong. And the 26 days before the gold-backed yuan, then it's not gold-backed, it's gold convertible, then it's not gold convertible, it's gold's going to drain from the West LBMA and move in a gold triangle, redo Bretton. Well, they start making up all kinds of nonsense. And unfortunately, people want to hear this nonsense. They believe it. Nikkei Gold Asian Review. China sees New World Order with oil benchmark backed by gold. There it is. Elites are losing control. Silver shortage, game changer, COMEX default. I have to say, no one else does this. People, all the alternative media, they all print these stories. They all run with the stories. They all defend the stories. And then when they don't happen, it's not even a never mind. It's like they just totally forget about it, and then the next pumper story comes out. So keep your eyes out for the game changers, because the game seems to be the same. Now, here's another game that remains the same. U.S. CFTC to fine UBS, Deutsche Bank, HSBC for future market spoofing manipulation. Now, that is a constant. Yes, there's always this, and it's a cost of doing business, and that's what these banks do. Yes, they manipulate. I don't deny that at all. But I do deny the gold pumper, silver pumper stories about game changers. Only one story this week I found on finding gold, but these divers found rare gold coins at the site of an 1800 shipwreck off the North Carolina coast. Now, we mentioned a $400 million crypto heist in Japan. Here's a $13 million heist. They didn't say, Brinks didn't say whether it was from the truck, but it's a lot harder to steal gold than it is to steal cryptocurrencies. If you've seen the movie Heat with Al Pacino and Robert De Niro, you know they have to put themselves in harm's way. They've got to get armed up. They have to take down the truck. They have to hold the drivers hostage. They have to get away with the goods. I don't think they were stealing gold in that movie. But the point is, it's a lot more difficult, and you get a lot less value when you try to hold up a Brinks truck than when you just raid an entire Japanese crypto exchange. Now, that was $13 million that was stolen. That was an unlucky number. But here's how $14 million worth of gold made it across London to the vault in a Porsche, a couple of Porsches. Here they are driving their gold. Lucky 14 getting it to the vault. Interesting story out of India. We always do the smuggled and seized gold, custom seized gold from mobile phones. So I guess what this guy realizes, the thing goes through the, of course, there's going to be some metal in a phone. They expect that, but probably not a kilo, which this guy stuffed inside of his mobile phone. It probably weighed like 8 or 9 pounds or whatever a kilo weighs. It's 2 point, never, it doesn't matter. It certainly weighed more than a regular phone, and he got caught smuggling that gold. China's vision of peace, harmony, and through trade and sound money and gold. Say it ain't so. Fresh doubts raised on China's bad loan data. Now, not only does China have massive amounts of debt, good portion of it, some say 30-40%, it's just unrecoverable, and it's bad. It's just bad debt. So it's not just that they owe a lot. And when they say, but the United States can never pay it back. Well, that's true. But here, they actually know they can't pay it back, because a lot of the lending in China is they'll have these state-owned enterprises, and then the state-owned banks will lend money to the state-owned enterprise to build a bridge that they don't need, or 30 buildings or office buildings that they don't need. And then, of course, the state-owned enterprise now owns 30, 70-story buildings with no tenants, so they have no way of paying the bank back. But the Chinese government tells the banks, don't worry about it, just pretend that those loans are performing, and we'll give you a little money here. And the whole thing is a scam. And this is just going on in China, and people are saying dollar collapse. The Chinese economy is a lot worse shape. And people say, oh, but they're building productive assets. No, they're not. If you have 30 office buildings in every town that you don't need, there's nothing productive about that. Oh, they'll grow into it. No, they won't. You build bridges to nowhere. That doesn't mean someone's going to get on it and go somewhere. It's not like if you build it, they will come. If it doesn't go anywhere, or it goes to a place where there's 40, 30, 80-story buildings, why would you go there? And why would you pay to go there in order to make the toll road make any money? So, free markets. Yeah, all in preparation of the gold yuan. That's another ridiculous concept. We're going to talk about why there will never be a gold-backed yuan or a gold-backed ruble for a variety of reasons, but especially in China, the last thing China wants is any restrictions on its currency. They want to be able to print it. They don't want to be bound by any type of gold standard. There you go. PBOC net injects 20 billion yuan into OMO on Monday. Yep, they just got to keep pumping money into the system. Where do they get the money? They print it. It's not backed by anything. Here's the New York Times. China housing market is like a casino. Not my words. Can a property tax tame it? Look, they're probably buying all these. All these are probably empty. See, I don't know how they managed to drive the prices up of housing. This goes against supply and demand when there's a massive glut in private housing and also in commercial real estate. It's going to crash. Here you go for freedom. China bans hip-hop culture and tattoos from television as tasteless, vulgar, and obscene. So these hip-hoppers, you won't see them on Chinese TV, even if they let you watch TV. U.S. mint sales, not very good. And we're going to end the month soon. The month isn't over, but only 35,000 1-ounce American gold eagles, a little over 3 million American silver eagles sold, and 22,500 American gold buffaloes. Now, those are good numbers for a average month during the year, but they're not good for January. More commentary on that when the month actually closes. Maybe we'll see a surge towards the end of the month. U.S. economy, the IMF is saying that the Trump tax plan will help boost U.S. and global growth. Trump talking about investment in companies all over the world being made in America. Also, we've got Disney, JP Morgan, many others adding jobs, preparing to open up new headquarters, giving employees more money, either raises or raising the minimum wage. And he's also saying they're doing massive regulation, and that's going to make the United States a powerhouse again. There's another story here. Trump bonuses. Trump boom grows to 250 companies that are giving tax cuts and bonuses to workers. That's real money going to real people. So we'll see how all that works out. It's, whether you like Trump, dislike Trump, the fact is that when you cut taxes and when you cut regulation, you do unleash economic activity. You can argue whether it's trickled down, whether it goes to the right people. Not the point. When there's no economic activity, there isn't much going to anybody. So it's the old example where you can tax corporations 40% and the government gets nothing, or you can lower the tax to 15%, then the government makes 15% on the money that they bring back or the money that they're taxed on, and the company has more money. Socialists call that a windfall for the corporation. They'd rather get nothing and charge them 190%. So I think you're going to see an economic boom in the U.S., which will be good for the dollar eventually, as the U.S. will then raise rates as more capital comes into the U.S. Consumer spending increases due to the bonuses, the lower taxes. People have more money. So you're going to get some inflation, price inflation I'm talking about, and you'll also have interest rates being raised during 2018 while the European Union, the Japanese, the Chinese, and others are still printing and lowering interest rates. That about does it for this week. Thanks very much for listening. If you're interested in buying gold or silver, you can do so through the Smaulgld site or through the links below this BitChute or YouTube at BGSC, Golden Eagle Coins, SD Bullion, Money Metals Exchange. You visit those sites through the links. You pay no more, no less than if you visited them directly, and you can compare pricing and shipping. And if you do buy, Smaulgld gets a small commission. It's not investment advice to buy gold or silver. But if you are going to buy gold or silver, please consider doing so through the Smaulgld site. Also, if you're interested in helping Smaulgld, you can donate via Bitcoin, via PayPal, or becoming a Smaulgld patron, or you can donate Litecoin as well. Thank you very much for listening.